Listen, K-fam. The bracelet slid out of her bag, and she never put it there. Naomi Bennett is an independent forensic gemologist, the specialist museums and auction houses call when they need to know if a jewel is real. She's black, sharp, precise. She reads a stone's whole history in the light. Ayu and the man who summons her, Han Tae-jun, the Black Dragon, a Korean mafia boss with a dragon inked down the right side of his neck, a steel watch on his wrist, and a mother's necklace that vanished the day she died. He wants one thing examined. A necklace that resurfaced in a rival family's boutique, seemingly identical, quietly impossible. So she walks in alone, cream dress, no name, no escort, just her hands and her eyes. She handles a bracelet, 2 watches, 3 necklaces across 3 glittering floors. She spots the altered settings. She spots the cereals that don't belong. Then champagne spills. An alarm screams. The doors lock. And that bracelet, the one she never touched, is pulled from her bag while a woman in pale gloves sneers. Framed. Trapped. In a store that answers to men who don't lose. But what Tae-jun does when those elevator doors open, nobody in that room saw it coming. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Naomi Bennett handed her coat to no one. The valet reached. She kept walking, the caramel wool sliding back onto her own shoulder, like she'd rather freeze than owe the boy a tip. 42nd floor. The elevator smelled like money that had never been counted by the people who made it, and she watched the numbers climb without blinking. She hadn't wanted this meeting. She'd said no twice. The third ask came with a car outside her building and a driver who called her Miss Bennett before she'd given him a name. So here she was. The doors opened onto a private landing, no hallway, no other doors. One suite. One man's name on the whole floor. A guard the size of a vending machine stepped aside without being told, and that told her plenty. These people didn't announce her. They already knew her heels on the marble, her breath, her heartbeat probably. Naomi went in. The suite swallowed the city behind glass, the skyline laid out like someone had spilled a jewelry box across black velvet. She didn't look at it. She looked at the door on the far wall, the closed one, the only one she hadn't watched anybody open. Old habit. You learn where the exits are before you learn the host's name. The host was already turned toward her. Han Tae-jun stood by the window with a glass he wasn't drinking, matte black suit, white shirt open at the collar, and there it was, the black dragon crawling up the right side of his neck, out from under the fabric, disappearing beneath his jaw like it was still deciding whether to eat him, broad through the shoulders, still through the middle. A man who'd learned that stillness costs other people more than movement. His eyes moved down her, slow, the navy dress, the line of her, back up to her face. Not rushed, not sorry. Naomi let him finish. Then she set her bag on the table between them, with a small, deliberate click. "If you're done appraising me," she said, "we can appraise the necklace." The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Somewhere behind him, a man in a graphite suit, driving gloves still on, park somebody, she'd clock the name later, pressed his lips flat to kill a smile. Tae-jun didn't smile. He set the glass down instead, and the sound it made on the marble was the only apology she was going to get. "Miss Bennett." His English was clean, deliberate, each word placed like he was paying for them. "Please, sit." "I'll stand until I know why I'm here." He liked that. She saw it flick across the sharp face and vanish. Men like him always liked it right up until they didn't. He crossed to a second table where a flat case waited under a single lamp. Black leather, brass corners, the kind of case that held one thing, because one thing was enough. He didn't open it yet. He rested 2 fingers on the lid, the signet ring catching light, and looked at her instead. 12 years ago, he said, a necklace left my family. Sapphire center, moon cut, colonial provenance, the imperial moon, a beat. You know it. She did. Every appraiser worth a loop knew it, the way sailors know a shipwreck. A thing that went down with everyone still arguing about who'd been steering. It doesn't exist, Naomi said. It was catalogued lost. Insurance closed the file. There's no imperial moon. There is. He opened the case. Not the necklace. A photograph. Glossy, recent, shot through glass with a long lens. You could see the reflection of a chandelier smeared across the frame. And under that chandelier, on a velvet stand, on a display floor she half recognized, sat a sapphire the size of a woman's thumbnail, with a clasp she would have known blind, in the dark, by touch alone. Her stomach did something she didn't let reach her face. Where was this taken? She already knew. She wanted him to say it. Maison Lumière. He watched her the way you watch a fuse. The CO family's house. 3 floors of it, downtown. They're selling my grandmother's necklace as a new acquisition. Untraceable provenance. Clean paper. His jaw shifted. They call it clean because they laundered it themselves. Naomi picked up the photograph, held it to the lamp, tilted it. She'd trained her whole life to keep her hands still in exactly this moment, and mostly she managed. Mostly. Because that clasp, that specific clasp, the double tongue with the recessed serial channel, she'd only ever seen that mechanism in one collection of work, from one workshop, and the man who'd built it had taught her everything she knew before he disappeared off the face of the earth and left her a business, a debt, and a hole where a father figure used to be. She put the photo down before her thumb could give her away. For a second, the room went thin around her. She was 24 again, an apron on, a bench light hot on the back of her neck, and a pair of dark hands guiding hers over a clasp exactly like the one in that photo. You feel that tongue seat, Naomi? That little click? That's the piece telling you it's home. The voice was so clear she almost turned to answer it. Then the sweet came back, the glass, the city, the man with the dragon watching her not blink. You have a rival, she said. Congratulations. Rich men collect those. What do you want from me? Authentication. Taejun came around the table. Not close. Close enough. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. A lawsuit needs proof. And proof needs an appraiser the courts can't buy, and the Seos can't touch. He stopped. You appraised the Dumont estate against a bank that offered you a house to lie. You didn't lie. You lost the contract and kept your license. His eyes held hers. You're the only name that came back clean. So he'd read her file. Of course he had. The car, the driver, the name before the name. He'd bought all of it already, the whole approach. And now he was showing her the receipt like it was a compliment. You investigated me. I invest carefully. I'm not an investment. No. Something almost human moved under the sharp face. You're the only person alive who can prove that necklace is stolen without me having to burn a building down to do it. Naomi walked to the window then, finally, and looked at the city she'd refused to look at. Not because it was pretty, because she needed 3 seconds where he couldn't read her mouth. Maison Lumière, 3 floors, the CO house. And that clasp meant her mentor's hands had touched this, recently, alive, somewhere. And nobody had told her, and this beautiful, dangerous man in the black suit maybe knew it, and maybe didn't. And either way, she was not going to hand him that grief to hold. She turned back around wearing nothing on her face. Tell me about your grandmother. The question landed somewhere he hadn't armored. She watched him take it. Han Soo-jin. He said the name like it weighed something. Across the room, a framed photograph sat on a shelf she hadn't noticed. An older woman, refined, gray hair swept up, the same elongated eyes as the man in front of her, and around her throat, in the picture, the necklace, the real one, worn, not displayed, loved, not sold. She built the collection herself. Piece by piece, 30 years. Every clasp, every setting, she signed off on. She used to say, "A jewel remembers every hand that ever held it." His mouth tightened. She died. The necklace vanished the same season. My family called it grief and looked away. I didn't. Naomi let the name settle. Han Soo-jin. A woman who signed her own clasps. A woman who talked to jewels like they could hear her. She'd never met her, and already she liked her better than most of the living people in this room. "She sounds like she knew what she was doing," Naomi said, "which means she'd have kept records, ledgers, certificates. A woman who signs off on every setting doesn't lose track of a necklace by accident." Taejun's eyes narrowed a fraction. The records went with her. How convenient. That's the word I used too. He didn't like the word any better in her mouth. Everything she kept, every book, every file, cleaned out inside a month of the funeral. Family said she'd been disorganized at the end. My grandmother was never disorganized a day in her life. His voice flattened. Somebody wanted the paper gone before anyone thought to read it. And now it's on a rival's shelf 12 years later. Now it's on a rival's shelf. He nodded once. So either it's a forgery, good enough to fool the world, or it's the real thing, and someone I trusted walked it out the door. He let that sit. I need to know which. Then I need it back. Naomi came away from the glass. She stood over the case and looked down at the photograph one more time. And this time she let herself see the whole thing. Not just the clasp, but the settings around the center stone, the prongs, the little cruelties of craft that told you whether a piece was born honest or made to lie. "Something's wrong with the settings," she said quietly. He went still in a new way. "Say that again." "The prongs." She tapped the glossy paper. "On the shoulder stones. They're too high. Whoever reset these lifted them to hide something. A swap, a repair, a serial they filed off. You don't lift a prong on a piece this important unless you're covering a wound." She straightened. "That's from a photograph, through glass, with a chandelier in the way. Put the real thing under my glass, and I'll tell you its whole life story." Whole life story. Taejun repeated it slowly, like he was testing the weight. "You can do that, from glass. I can do better than that under a loupe." She tapped the shoulder stones again. "See these two? Matched pair, supposedly. But look at the tables, the flat top faces. This one throws light straight. That one leaks it out the side, right here. They're not the same cut. Somebody replaced one and matched it close enough to fool a buyer with a fat checkbook and no glass." She looked up. "Your grandmother would have caught it in a heartbeat. Which tells me whoever did the swap did it after she was gone. You don't cheat a woman who checks. You wait until she can't." For the first time, Taejun looked at her like she was a person and not a purchase. "Then you'll do it." "I didn't say that." The room cooled a degree. The man in the driving gloves shifted his weight. Naomi didn't move. "I have conditions," she said. "You don't get to skip them because you're rich enough to be bored by them." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Name them." "1." She held up a finger. "I work the piece, not you. You don't tell me what it is before I tell you. If I say it's real, it's real. If I say it's fake, you don't buy a second opinion." She waited for the nod. She got it. 2. Custody. The second anything I authenticate touches evidence, it goes into a chain. Signed, dated, sealed. Not your safe, not your family's. A chain the law can read. Because if I put my name on this and it disappears into a vault behind a dragon, I'm the one who hangs for it, not you. Done. 3. Her voice dropped, and it got harder, not softer. I don't do violence. I don't launder your revenge. The minute this stops being about proving the truth and starts being about you burning the COs down for sport, I walk, and I take my findings with me, and you can explain to a courtroom why your only clean witness quit. She let the whole thing land. You hired an appraiser, not a soldier, not a trophy, not a pretty thing to keep the mood right in the room. Silence stretched out long enough to hear the city through the glass. Tae-jun studied her. The dragon on his neck didn't move, but everything under it recalculated. She could see it. The man doing math on exactly how much control he'd just agreed to give away. You always negotiate before you know the fee, he said. The fee's the easy part. The fee I trust you on. She almost smiled and didn't let it out. It's everything after the fee that gets people like me killed. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not offense, recognition. Like she'd named a door he'd walked people through before, and hadn't expected her to see it. Han Song-ho will manage your access, he said, tipping his head toward the closed door on the far wall, the one she'd clocked coming in, the one that opened now, on cue, and out stepped a man in a muted gray suit, with a face built to be forgotten, and a small mark on his wrist. She filed away without knowing yet why. My cousin. He'll get you into Maison Lumière as a client. You look. You touch what a rich woman is allowed to touch. You leave. No badges, no warrants, no scene. A client. Naomi turned the word over. You want me to walk into the CO house wearing my own face. They don't know your face. Seong-ho spoke for the first time, flat and even. They know 100 appraisers. You're not on the list. Everyone's on somebody's list. Not yet, Tae-jun said, and there was something almost like a warning folded into it. Gentle, which she'd learn later, was the only kind of warning he knew how to give. That's why we move before you are. Naomi looked between the two men, the cousin with the forgettable face, the boss with the loud neck and the quiet hands, and she thought about the clasp, and the mentor whose ghost was apparently walking around downtown behind 3 floors of glass, and about the fact that she had come here to say no a 3rd time and was now standing in a Mafia man's suite, negotiating access to a rival dynasty's flagship store. She should have left. She knew she should have left. She picked up the photograph instead and slid it into the inside pocket of her bag, the one with the zipper. I keep this, she said. It wasn't a question. Tae-jun's eyes flicked to the bag, to the zipper, to the small, competent violence of a woman securing evidence in front of the man who'd just handed it to her. He didn't ask for it back. Terms, he said. All 3. Agreed. Say them. You work the piece, not me. Custody goes to a chain, not a vault. No violence, or you walk with your findings. He said it back to her clean, word for word, the way a man says a thing he intends to be held to, or the way a man says a thing he's already planning how to break. She couldn't tell which yet. That was the problem with the beautiful ones. The dragon told you exactly what he was, and the face told you nothing at all. When? She said. Thursday. He picked his glass back up, and this time he drank. The store's showing a new collection, champagne buyers, the whole circus. You'll get an hour on 3 floors before anyone thinks to wonder who you are. An hour, 3 floors, a house that laundered stolen legacy and called it clean. One more thing, Naomi said, at the door, coat already back on her own shoulder, because she'd be damned if she let the vending machine hold it for her. If I find out this necklace is real, if it's her necklace, the one in that photo, around her neck, what happens to whoever walked it out the door? Tae-jun looked at the framed picture of Soo-jin across the room. A long time, long enough that the answer, when it came, was the truest thing he'd say all night. That, he said, depends on how far inside my own house they were standing. The elevator took her back down 42 floors. Naomi watched the numbers fall and pressed her hand flat against the bag, against the zipper, against the photograph and the clasp and the ghost inside it. Thursday. She should have said no a third time. The revolving door of Maison Lumière spat her out onto marble, and Naomi Bennett let it. She kept her chin level, her pace slow, the walk of a woman who buys instead of one who works. 9:42 on the clock above the reception desk. 1 hour. She started counting from there. A hostess in a black uniform lifted a tray. "Champagne, madam?" "Water." Still. Naomi took the glass and let it sweat against her palm. The bubbles she left on the tray. A woman with something to steal keeps both hands free. The first floor was watches and small stones, arranged so the eye traveled outward, cheapest at the door, cruelest at the back. She let the caramel coat announce her. It did the work. A young attendant peeled off the wall and drifted toward her elbow before she reached the second case. "Anything in particular you're drawn to? I'll know it when I touch it." That earned her a soft laugh and a key. He unlocked a case and stepped back the polite half-step. Naomi lifted a bracelet first, articulated links, sapphires channel set along the spine. She turned it under the display light and felt her pulse do the thing it always did when the story on the tag stopped matching the story in her hands. The links were newer than the clasp, not by decades, by months. She counted the sapphires without seeming to count. 22. Channel set, which meant no prongs to lift, which meant a stone could be popped and replaced, and no honest eye would ever catch the seam. Whoever built this bracelet had chosen the setting for the crime, not for the stone. A channel hides the swap, a prong announces it. This maison, apparently, preferred to hide. She set it down without a flicker. Pretty, too loud for me. 2 watches came next, both men's. Both offered because the attendant had already priced her wrist and decided she was buying for a husband. She humored him. She turned the first over. Serial on the case back. Clean, deep, honest. She turned the second. The serial sat in a recessed channel, and the channel had been polished after the numbers were cut. Someone had gone back in. Someone had wanted the number harder to lift and softer to swap. "Family piece," the attendant said, watching her thumb. "Estate acquisition. Fully certified." Certified by whom? The house. He said it the way people say a thing they have never once questioned. Naomi smiled and gave the watch back. In her head, she filed it under the same drawer as the bracelet. Newer body, older bones. A house that certified itself. He'd love it, she said, meaning the husband who lived only in this attendant's imagination. "Send me the paperwork on the movement. The full service history, not the summary card." The attendant's mouth held its shape a beat too long. "The full history stays with the house, madam. We provide the certificate of authenticity. You provide the certificate you write." She kept it light, a woman teasing a shop boy, and watched the sentence land somewhere it wasn't supposed to. The certificate a house wrote about itself was the whole engine. A dirty stone walked in the back, got a clean name stapled to its throat on the way through, and walked out the front worth triple and untraceable. The paperwork wasn't proof. The paperwork was the laundry. He recovered with a laugh and reached for a third watch. She let him. Every minute he spent selling was a minute she spent reading. She climbed to the second floor on a staircase built to make you feel poor. Mirror on every riser, so a woman watched her own ankles rise toward money she was pretending she already had. At the top, a second attendant waited, older, and behind the older attendant, half a room back, stood a woman who was not an attendant at all. Black bob, chin length, cut like it had a grudge, pale gloves, a gold brooch pinned high on the collar, and the woman's fingers already resting on it, already turning it a quarter inch and back. Yu-Mi-Ra didn't come forward. She logged Naomi the way a camera logs a face, and went back to pretending she was arranging a case she had already finished arranging. Naomi clocked her and moved on. You don't stare at the one staring at you. You buy time by buying nothing loudly. Earrings on the second floor. A matched pair of drops, old mine cuts, and the tag sang a lullaby about a countess and a war and a lucky escape. Naomi held them up to the window light one at a time. The left one drank the light and gave it back warm. The right one leaked. Light fell through the pavilion and out the bottom like water through a cracked cup, because the stone had been swapped, and whoever set the new one had cut the seat too deep to hide the substitution and too shallow to fix it. Matched pair, one real grandmother, one liar wearing her dress. She held the two drops side by side over the window and tilted them the same degree, so the difference wasn't a matter of trust. It was a matter of physics. Anyone standing beside her could see if they knew where to look. The real stone bent the light and kept it. The liar let it fall through and out. A gemologist called it a window, that dead patch where a bad cut leaks the fire straight through the bottom of the stone. Su Jin, whoever she'd been, would never have set a stone with a window in her collection. Someone else had. Someone in a hurry, after she was in the ground. The pair is spoken for provisionally, the older attendant murmured. But provisions can lapse. They can, Naomi agreed, and laid the liar down first. A brooch after that, because Mira had drifted close enough now that the brooch was clearly a test. A house brooch, twin to the gold thing on Mira's own collar, offered up as if it were nothing, as if a woman shopping estate diamonds would want the staff badge. Naomi took it anyway. She turned it. On the back, under the pin, a serial, and the serial had a sibling she had seen 12 hours ago through teleobjective glass. Same cutter's hand, same recessed channel. The clasp of the vanished thing and the back of this loyalty pin had been made by the same fingers, and those fingers had guided hers to a workbench when she was 24 and did not know yet what a double-tongue clasp was for. Her stomach dropped and her face held. She'd been holding that face since a hotel suite the night before. She was good at it. She handed the brooch back to Mira directly, because refusing the woman's hand would have meant something. "Sweet," she said. "Not for me." Mira took it. The gloves whispered. "Not everything here is for sale to everyone." "Then I'll try the third floor," Naomi said, "and see what is." 31 minutes gone. She climbed again. The third floor was necklaces, and the good lie. This was where they put the pedestal, the single spotlight, the velvet rope you weren't supposed to notice was a rope. And this was where the champagne began to circle her instead of the room. She noticed the pattern before she named it. A hostess passed. Champagne. She declined. 2 minutes. A different hostess passed. Closer. Champagne. She declined. A minute. A third came from a blind angle. Tray tipped a degree too far toward her coat, and Naomi turned her hip a quarter second before the glass would have kissed her sleeve and let the near miss land on empty air. "So sorry, madam. So clumsy of me." No harm. But she watched the hostess retreat, and watched where the woman went. And where she went was to Mira, and what passed between them was a look and nothing else. No words. The kind of wordless traffic that only runs on a line that's been running a long time. This wasn't clumsiness. Clumsiness apologizes and stays flustered. This one apologized and got calm. Naomi had spent a career learning to read the difference between a person who made a mistake and a person who executed one. But there was a shape to it now. 3 offers on the third floor, when one had been enough on the first 2. They weren't feeding her. They were building a moment where her hands would be full and her bag would be open, and everyone's eyes would be on a spreading stain, instead of on the pocket at her hip. Naomi shifted the tote bag from her shoulder to across her body and set her forearm flat over the flap. She kept walking. 3 necklaces on the third floor, and she made herself work each one, because a client who skips the merchandise to guard her purse tells the room exactly what she came to do. First necklace, Riviere, 40 stones, and 11 of them sang a different age than the rest. Reset, recut, laundered through a legitimate case so that the next time they moved, they'd move with a Maison Lumière provenance stapled to their throats. Second necklace, a lavalier, and the drop at the bottom had been drilled and re-drilled, the original hole plugged and hidden under a bezel that didn't match the metalwork above it. Third necklace, and here her fingers slowed on their own. The clasp, double tongue, recessed serial channel, the same signature, the same hand, and when she tilted it, the serial in the channel had been struck over. Not swapped, struck. A number cut, then a second number cut on top, deliberately, so that the two together made a third thing that was neither, a code hiding as a mistake. She read what she could of it. She read it twice, the way you read an address you're about to memorize because you can't write it down. Her mouth went dry. This wasn't a swap, this was a message, and somebody had spent 30 years learning to write it into metal, so small that only the person who taught her would know to look. 4 digits she could resolve. A gap, then 2 more, struck heavier, canted the way a hand cants when it's writing fast and afraid of being caught. She held the clasp under the pedestal light and turned it a hair each way, coaxing the overstruck numbers to separate the way you coax a name out of a worn tombstone. A serial doesn't hide from its own house. A serial only hides from the people the house is stealing from, which meant the woman who'd cut these had known, 30 years back, exactly who would one day come reading, and had trusted that reader more than she'd trusted her own family's vault. Naomi's thumb went still. She wasn't looking at inventory. She was looking at a letter left for the dead to send. Beautiful clasp, she said, to say something, to keep her voice from doing what her heartbeat was doing. The house is very proud of its clasps, said a voice at her shoulder, and it was Mira again, up here now, gloved and patient. Everyone signed. We are the only maison that still signs by hand. You're not, Naomi said, before she could stop the truth from walking out of her mouth. She smiled to bury it. I mean, surely someone in Geneva still does. Mirad's fingers found the brooch on her own collar. Quarter turn. Back. Her eyes had gone flat and busy at once, the eyes of someone receiving an instruction through an earpiece she was pretending she didn't wear. Perhaps you'd like to see the collection catalog. Downstairs, 2nd floor. We keep it with the seating. An invitation to descend. An invitation to be in transit, on the stairs, hands occupied with a heavy book, when whatever was coming came. Naomi had felt the floor tilt like this before, in the Dumont conference room, the second before a man in a good suit slid a contract across a table and offered her a house to sign it. I'll finish up here first, she said. She did not get to finish up there. The 4th hostess came fast, from the pedestal side, and this one didn't aim for a near miss. The tray came up, the glasses went sideways, and champagne arced across the velvet rope in a bright cold rope of its own. The room turned toward it. Every trained head on the 3rd floor swiveled to the spill the way heads are supposed to. A gasp, a scramble, a napkin, the choreography of a small public accident. Naomi didn't turn. She looked down, at her own hip, at her own bag, and that was why she caught it. The half-second where a gloved hand that was not hers moved along the side of the taupe bag, at the seam pocket, quick and low, in and gone under the cover of the crowd's turned backs. She snapped her forearm down. Too late by a breath, and then the alarm. It came from everywhere, from the walls, from the ceiling, a flat industrial shriek that had nothing to do with the pretty room it lived in. The lights kicked from warm gold to a hard clinical white, and the white made every face ugly and honest at once. At the top of the stairs, a steel shutter dropped out of the ceiling and met the floor with a sound like a jaw closing. The same sound repeated below her, floor 2, floor 1, 3 jaws, 3 floors, all shut. Doors locked, building sealed. The champagne stain stopped mattering. The hostess who'd spilled it was already gone, folded back into a doorway, her work done. The room of buyers stood frozen with flutes in their hands, and into that freeze walked Yumi Ra, unhurried now, because the hurry had been the setup, and this part she got to savor. "Nobody move, please," she said, please, like a knife says please. Store policy. A piece has left its case. Heads began to turn again, this time toward each other, that ugly instinct where a crowd goes looking for the one it's allowed to suspect. Naomi stood very still in the white light and felt the temperature of 40 strangers drop toward her, the only face on the floor that didn't have 3 generations of the right kind of money behind it. Mira crossed the marble to her, slow, the gloves, the brooch, turning. "Madam, you've handled a great many of our pieces today. I've bought none of them. Handling is what your attendants unlocked the cases for." "Of course." Mira's mouth did something that wasn't a smile, and used a smile's muscles. "Then you won't mind." "Mind what?" "Your bag." The word went out across the floor, and the strangers leaned into it. Naomi's hand was already flat over the flap. She knew what was under it. She'd felt the gloved hand find the seam pocket, the side pocket, the little zippered mouth on the right that she never used, and she knew with the whole cold certainty of the Dumont afternoon exactly what had been posted into it, while a rope of champagne pulled every eye the other way. "I'll open it," Naomi said, "with a witness who doesn't work for you. Everyone here is your witness." Mira lifted her gloved hand, palm up, the gesture of a woman asking for something she has already taken. "The bag, or security opens it. Those are the 2 doors, madam, and both of them are in this room." "I go." Naomi breathed it out through her nose, once, low enough that no one caught the shape of the word. Then she moved, because standing there let Mira narrate her, and a woman narrated is a woman already convicted. She unslung the tote bag herself. She held it up so the room could see her hands, both of them, nowhere near the seam. She turned the side pocket toward the white light, and toward the strangers, and toward the little glass eye of the camera she'd clocked in the ceiling on her way up. She wanted every lens on the pocket before she opened it. She wanted the record to show whose hand went in last. "You'll all see this," she said, and her voice carried flat and clear over the shriek of the alarm, the voice of a woman who has decided the floor is hers to speak on. "You'll see me open a pocket I never touched." She pinched the zipper. Mira's fingers had gone still on the brooch. For the first time all morning the woman wasn't turning it. She was waiting, the way you wait for a thing you've already arranged, and that stillness was its own confession to anyone watching for it. The zipper ran. Inside, against the taupe lining, catching the hard white light and throwing it back in a spray of blue and cold fire, lay the articulated bracelet from the first floor, the sapphires along the spine, the newer links, the older clasp. The piece she'd turned over 91 minutes ago and set down because it was too loud for her. It was, suddenly, very loud. "There it is," Mira breathed, and now the smile arrived in full, and it was the only warm thing in the room. She turned to the frozen buyers, to the cameras, to the whole sealed building, and she raised her gloved hand toward Naomi Bennett, like a woman presenting a verdict. "Thief." The word landed. 40 faces closed like doors. A man near the pedestal set his flute down on the velvet, as if being near it might implicate him. A woman in gray pulled her own bag closer to her ribs, and the gesture rippled, bag after bag drawn tight against 40 expensive coats, a whole floor deciding at once which side of the marble it stood on. Naomi felt the cold of it more than she'd felt the 12 degrees outside a hotel the night before. That cold had been weather. This one had a face, 40 of them, and every face had already read the ending off the back of her hands. She let them look. She'd stood in a room like this before, a bank's conference room, a contract on the table, a house on the other side of one signature, and every polished person in it, certain she'd be reasonable, because reasonable was the only thing people like her were allowed to be. She hadn't been reasonable then. She saw no reason to start now. "You want me to panic," she said, and she said it to Mira but pitched it for the cameras. "You built the whole morning around the second I'd panic. The champagne, the 3 glasses. The catalog you wanted in my hands on the stairs." She lifted the open bag an inch higher, sapphires flaring blue in the white light. "You planned everything except a woman who reads settings for a living, standing still." Mira's glove tightened on the brooch. The quarter turn didn't come. That, more than anything the woman had said all morning, told Naomi she'd hit the seam. And 40 stories up in Naomi's memory, a man in a matte black suit had told her the operation was clean, no badge, no warrant, no scene, 1 hour and out. She had 91 minutes on the clock and a stolen bracelet in her own bag and 3 steel shutters between her and the street, and somewhere above the shriek of the alarm she heard, faint and rising, the mechanical hum of the elevator on the far wall beginning to climb. The elevator doors opened and the alarm did not stop, but the room stopped anyway. Taejun stepped out onto the 3rd floor with his hands loose at his sides and did not raise his voice above the shriek. He did not need to. 40 buyers turned toward him at once, and the turning moved through the crowd like a wave breaking backward, flute glasses lowering, conversations dying mid-word, 40 faces reading the black overcoat and the collar and the mark below the ear, and arriving, one by one, at the same silent conclusion. The man who owned the air had walked into a room that belonged to the Seo family, and the room knew it. He crossed to Naomi first, not to Mira, to Naomi. "Which ones did you touch?" he said. Not a question, a ledger opening. Naomi kept the taupe bag open in her hand, the planted bracelet still bright against the lining, her fingers still spread wide and far from the seam, so the ceiling camera had no story to tell but the true one. She held the bag where it was. She looked at him the way she'd looked at the shoulder stones in the photograph, measuring for the flaw. "You're early," she said. "You're welcome," he said, and something at the corner of his mouth almost moved. Mira recovered first. She stepped between them, gloves pale against the black of her uniform, chin lifting. "This is a private event," she said. "You are not on the list, Mr. Han, and this woman is being detained for theft. The police are already—" "The police are in the lobby," Taejun said, without looking at her. "I passed them. They are very comfortable." He held Naomi's eyes. "Which ones?" A murmur moved through the buyers behind her, low and quick. Someone near the stairs whispered a name, and the name traveled, and Naomi caught the shape of it on 3 different mouths before it reached her ears. The Black Dragon. 20 minutes ago she had been the thief on the 3rd floor. Now she was the woman the Black Dragon had crossed a locked building to stand beside, and she watched the crowd rearrange her in their heads accordingly, 40 appraisals revising at once, and she let them look, let them wonder which of the 2 of them was more dangerous. Naomi understood then what he was doing, and the understanding landed cold and clean in her chest. She did not answer him for the crowd. She answered him for the record. "1st floor," she said. "A sapphire bracelet, 22 stones, channel set, 2 men's watches. 2nd floor, a pair of old mine drop earrings and a house brooch. 3rd floor, 3 necklaces, a 40-stone rivière, a lavalier, and the one on the pedestal behind you." She let the words fall like weights onto a scale. "I handled 9 pieces. I put none of them in my bag." "Nobody asked you to defend yourself," Mira snapped. "She's not," Taejun said. "She's giving me an inventory." He finally turned to Mira, and the cordial nothing on his face was worse than a threat. Bring me your floor manager, and bring the sale terminal up here, all three. Mira's hand went to the gold brooch at her collar. She caught it doing that and forced it back down to her side. Mr. Co is not. Co, Do Juan is not here, Taejun said. You are, so you'll do. There was a beat where the whole floor held its breath, and in that beat, Naomi watched a thing happen that she had seen only twice in her life. A room changing hands without a single object moving. Mira had walked in owning this space. She walked toward the terminal, now owning nothing but the order she'd been given. A young attendant wheeled the point-of-sale station out from behind the necklace counter. The same attendant who had unlocked the first-floor cases for Naomi an hour and a half ago, his hands not quite steady on the cart. Taejun stayed on his feet. He stood over the terminal, the way a man stands over a grave he intends to fill. The sapphire bracelet, he said. Ring it. The attendant looked at Mira. Mira looked at nothing. It's evidence in an active theft, Mira said. It can't be sold, it's in her bag, which makes it a display error, which makes it for sale. Taejun's voice stayed even, almost gentle, and that was the frightening part, the way he never once reached for volume. You called it stolen, in front of 40 people and a camera. Either it left its case by theft, in which case you file a report and I watch you do it, or it left its case by accident, in which case I am a buyer and you are wasting my afternoon. He let it sit, choose. Naomi watched Mira do the math and lose. To keep the theft alive, Mira would have to produce the report, name Naomi, and open the whole floor to the police she'd summoned. Police who would then have to explain, on paper, how a bracelet crossed 40 feet of showroom into a client's zippered pocket under 6 cameras. To kill the theft, all Mira had to do was let the man buy the thing. Ring it, Mira said quietly to the attendant. The word cost her something. It came out of her like a tooth. The attendant's fingers moved. The bracelet had a price. It was obscene. Taejun took a matte black card from his coat and set it on the reader without looking at the number. Now the 2 watches, he said. The attendant blinked. Sir? The 2 she named, first floor. Ring them. Taejun turned his head a fraction toward Naomi, the one with the recessed serial, that one especially. Naomi had told him about the recessed serial an hour ago in no room at all. She had told no one, she had memorized and moved on, and yet he'd said it, casually, the way you repeat a thing you were handed. She kept her face still and understood, with a small drop in her stomach, that Sung-ho had been feeding him from somewhere. That there had been a second set of eyes in this building the whole time. She filed it. She did not let it show. Ring them, Taejun said again, and the attendant rang them. 2 watches, the card again. The reader chimed its small, obscene chime. The attendant's cart had gathered a cluster now. A second staffer had come up from the first floor with the physical pieces in gray felt trays, laying each named object beside its ring on the terminal, so the sale had a body, as well as a number. The sapphire bracelet went into a tray, the 2 watches. And Naomi noticed the way the young attendant's hands slowed over the second watch, the one with the serial polished into its recessed channel, the way his thumb found the case back without being told to, as though he had been trained to check exactly that spot, as though the whole staff knew which pieces carried the marks, and had spent years handling them gently around the truth. She said nothing. She added it to the audit forming in her head, the one that was already longer than the receipt. The earrings came up next. The brooch, the house brooch, twin to the one at Mira's own collar, and Naomi watched Mira flinch when it crossed the terminal, because it was the piece cut by the same hand as the vanished necklace's clasp, the hand Naomi still had not named to anyone. Mira's gloved fingers found her own brooch again, and this time she did not catch herself, and she stood there, with her hand pressed to the gold at her throat, like a woman holding a wound shut. Then the Riviere went up, then the Lavaliere. The necklace on the pedestal, Taejun said. That one is not for sale, Mira said, and for the first time there was something real under the words, something close to fear. That is the centerpiece of the collection, the Imperial. She stopped herself. Say it, Taejun said softly. She didn't. It's not the real one, Naomi said, flat, to the terminal, to the camera, to the room. The center stone windows under a loop, the prongs on the shoulders sit high, to hide a swap made after your grandmother died. Whatever's on that pedestal, it isn't the piece that left this family 12 years ago, but it came through this house wearing that name. She looked at Mira. Sell him the fake, he'll pay full price for it, and then it's his. Taejun set the card down again. All of it, he said to the attendant. And then I want the collection registers. Every piece catalogued under the same 3 collections these came from. Ring those too. The attendant's mouth opened and produced nothing. You heard him, Naomi said, and there was, for one word, a snap of something bright and hard in her voice, the tone of a woman who has spent 91 minutes being called a thief and has run entirely out of patience for slow hands. Every serial in those 3 collections. Pull the book. They pulled the book. It took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of the alarm finally cut to silence, of the steel shutters staying down, of 40 buyers standing in a cooling room, watching a Han empty a CO vault through a sales terminal, one line at a time. Pieces Naomi had never touched, pieces still locked in cases 2 floors down, pieces in the back that had not yet been set out. Every serial that shared a collection with the 9 she'd handled went onto the same receipt, and the receipt grew, and the number at the bottom climbed past the point where numbers stop meaning money and start meaning weather. Millions. Then more than millions. Naomi understood exactly what he was building, and it was not a purchase. It was a wall. Everything she had touched was now legally his. Everything in the same collections as the things she'd touched was now legally his. Which meant every altered setting, every reset stone, every recessed serial, every overcut number she had read into her memory upstairs was now, by receipt, by card, by timestamp, evidence that could not be quietly recalled, repolished, melted, or disappeared by the house that had made them. The Seo family could not clean what they no longer owned. Mira could not correct a display error on a bracelet that now belonged to Han Taejun. The laundering line, cut the piece, house certify it, sell it clean, had just been severed at the last link because the buyer had bought the whole tail of the snake in one afternoon and had no intention of ever asking the house for a certificate. He wasn't rescuing her. He was freezing the crime scene with money. It was the most expensive evidence bag ever assembled, and it was being assembled in front of the very people who would carry the story of it out into the city within the hour. That was the second thing he was buying, Naomi realized, and it was worth more than the pieces. He was buying witnesses, 40 of them, wealthy and connected and stunned, who would now swear in any room that mattered that they had watched Han Taejun purchase the entire suspect collection, openly, legally, at full price, with a woman named as custodian standing at his side. No one could ever claim the pieces had been stolen, planted, forged after the fact, or spirited out a back door. The whole transaction was happening in daylight under a ceiling camera with a crowd for a jury. A man did not do that by accident. A man did that when he had already thought 3 moves past the room. The number at the bottom of the ribbon climbed again. A woman in the thinning crowd made a small sound. A laugh that wasn't one, the sound people make when they watch more money move in an afternoon than they will earn in a life. Custody, Taejun said, when the last serial went in. Sir? The attendant was pale now, sweat at his hairline. The custody transfers to her. He kept his hands still. He didn't have to point. Every piece I just bought. Chain of custody, signed, dated, sealed. Not to me, to Naomi Bennett. Her verdict stands on all of it. Put it on the receipt." The attendant looked at Mira one last time, and Mira had nothing left to give him, so he typed it, and it printed, and the machine fed out a ribbon of paper longer than a man's arm, and at the bottom of it, under a number that could have bought the building it was printed in, sat a single line naming the woman with the tote bag as sole custodian of everything the Seo family had spent 12 years hiding. Taejun tore the receipt off clean. "Now open the shutters," he said, "and walk your police back to their cars. There's no theft. The buyer is satisfied." Mira didn't move for a moment. Then she reached under the counter, and somewhere below them a motor engaged, and the 3 steel shutters began to climb. Gray daylight cutting back into the white showroom in a slow rising line. The buyers exhaled as one. A few of them started, very quietly, to leave. Taejun held the receipt out to Naomi. She looked at it. She did not take it. "Not here," she said. He understood, because he lowered his hand, and he waited, and he cleared the floor with 2 words to the attendant, and a look at Mira that sent her toward the stairs, with the brooch clenched in her fist. Park was suddenly there at the elevator, gloves on, holding the doors, though Naomi had not seen him come up. Within a minute, the 3rd floor held only the 2 of them, and the empty pedestal, and the long paper hanging from his hand. Then he gave it to her, and this time she took it, and she read it. The whole ribbon, top to bottom, every serial, the custody line, the seal, the way she read everything, twice, before she believed it. "You froze it," she said. "I bought it." "Don't." She let the ribbon of paper hang from her fingers, all of it, top to bottom. A man who wanted to own jewelry buys one piece. A man who wanted to own the truth buys the whole collection so nobody can edit it. You bought the second thing. Say the honest word for it. He considered her. "Custody," he said finally. "I bought custody, and then I gave it away. You froze it." She folded the receipt once, along the crease he'd torn. "Nothing in this collection can be altered or moved now without my signature. That's not a purchase. That's a cage with my name on the door." "You said custody by a signed chain," Taejun said. "Legible to the law. Not the family vault. Your first condition, almost. Your second." A pause. I listened. She should have felt the relief of it. She felt the edges of the trap instead, because a man who could buy a crime scene to protect it could also buy one to own the woman standing in the middle of it, and the 2 looked identical from the inside until it was too late to tell them apart. "Thank you is what you're waiting for," she said. "No." "Good." She slid the receipt into the inside pocket of the bag, the zippered one, the same pocket a gloved hand had opened 90 minutes ago, and she closed the zipper herself this time, and the small sound of it was the loudest thing in the room. "Because I want you to hear this exactly once, and then I want us to go analyze what you just spent a fortune to protect." He waited. "You bought the pieces." Naomi's voice dropped, level and dry, no tremor in it, and no mercy either. "You bought the receipts. You bought the freeze. You bought a wall around this whole rotten collection, so nobody in that family can touch it before I read it. Fine, that was smart, and it was the right move, and I'd have told you to make it if you'd asked." She stepped closer, close enough that he had to look down, close enough that the dragon at his collar was just a shape at the edge of her eye, and nothing she would ever remark on. "But you didn't buy me. You didn't buy the right to decide what happens to me when this is over, or what I sign, or who I hand my verdict to. That paper says I hold custody. It doesn't say you hold me. If you ever confuse those 2 things, I walk out of this the same way I walked out on the Dumont Bank, with my license and nothing else, and you can explain to your dead grandmother's ledger why the one clean hands in this city put down her necklace and left." For a long moment, he said nothing at all, and the daylight climbed the last inch up the shutters, and the empty pedestal threw a thin shadow across the floor between them. "Understood," Taejun said. "Say it back." She held his eyes. "You made me repeat my own conditions in your suite. Every word, back to me, so I'd know you'd heard them, and couldn't pretend later that you hadn't. Same rule, both directions. That's how this works, or it doesn't work." Something crossed his face. Surprise, maybe, that she'd caught him in his own habit, made him do to himself what she'd made him do in the suite 2 nights ago. His grandmother's line came up in him unbidden. A jewel remembers every hand that held it. He wondered, briefly and privately, and in a place he would never show her, whether a woman did too. "I didn't buy the right to decide what happens to you," he said. "You hold custody, I don't hold you." "Verbatim," she said. "Good." And then she turned from him and walked back to the pedestal and looked down at the fake that had worn a queen's name, and her voice came back different, quick and low and all business. The tiredness burned off it. "We move everything to a lab tonight. Not your vault. Neutral ground, my equipment, my seals. I need loops, a spectroscope, UV, and a bench with north light or the closest thing a hotel can rent me before midnight." She was already cataloging, already 3 steps into the audit, the receipt a hard rectangle against her ribs. "The center stone on this thing is glass and paste, and a good liar. But the real sapphire is out there, and it's carrying something your grandmother put in it, and when I find it—" She stopped. Below them, faint through the open shutters, a phone was ringing at the abandoned reception desk, and then a second phone, and then a third, all through the emptied store, and none of them being answered. And Naomi lowered the receipt in her hand, and understood that somewhere in this city, the news had just reached a man named Seo Do-hwan, that Han Tae-jun had walked into Maison Lumière and bought the evidence off the floor before anyone thought to stop him, and that the smiling half of this family had just learned exactly how far behind he already was. The lab smelled like cold metal and nothing else, and that was exactly how Naomi wanted it. She set her own seals on the door before she set anything on the bench. 2 guards outside, hers, not his. The collection came up in gray cases stacked on a rolling cart, each case tagged with the chain number from the receipt, and she checked every tag against the tape before she let Park roll the cart 1 inch past the threshold. midnight. North light was gone with the sun, so she flooded the bench with the corrected daylight lamps and let her eyes adjust. Taejun came in behind the cart. He stopped at the line of tape on the floor she'd laid down. "That's the edge," she said, not looking up. "You watch from there." He watched from there. She started with the earrings. The old mine drops. Left one first, the honest one, the one that ate the light and gave nothing back. She seated it in the tweezers and turned it under the loop until the table filled with fire from corner to corner. No leak, no gray. Then the right one. The window opened the second she tilted it. A gray mouth right under the crown, where the stone thinned out and the light walked straight through instead of bouncing. A real old mine doesn't do that. A swapped stone cut for weight instead of return does exactly that. She set them side by side on the black tray and slid a card behind them. Wrote 1 line. Not the swap yet, the mount. Because the mount was the tell. She lifted the right drop and looked at the prongs from underneath. 6 prongs, 4 of them original, tired, worn soft at the tips from 30 years of somebody's neck. 2 of them younger, sharper, re-tipped. Somebody had opened this basket, lifted the true stone out, dropped a cheaper one in, and closed 2 prongs back down with fresh gold that hadn't had time to dull. "Talk," Taejun said from the tape. Later, she didn't raise her voice. "You wanted a verdict. A verdict takes hours. Sit down or stand still. Either way, stop breathing on my light." He sat. She worked the Riviere next. 40 stones. She'd told the room 40 and 11 that morning, and now she had to earn the number. She ran the string under the loop stone by stone, reading the culets, reading the girdles, and she counted the strangers as she went. 1. A stranger sat too high, a modern brilliant faking an old cut, its facets too clean, too machine-even. 4. 9. She marked each with a dot of removable wax on the setting, a code only she could read. 11. She stopped at 11 and went back and checked the run twice, because a number you say out loud in front of 40 witnesses is a number you die on. 11 strangers in a river of 40, all of them reset in mounts that had been opened and closed, all of them cheaper than the ghost they replaced, and every one of the swapped mounts carried the same signature on the closing work, the same angle of the retip, the same soft over-polish that dragged a whisper of gold across the serial channel, the same hand. She knew the hand. She'd known it for 2 days and told nobody. She kept it behind her teeth now, too. She photographed each stranger before she moved it, overhead, then raking, then a scale shot with the reference card in frame. She logged the wax dots against the chain numbers in a column of her own shorthand. Every mark she made was a mark a court could read back to her later, and she made each one twice. A verdict wasn't a feeling. A verdict was a paper trail somebody could try to break and couldn't. "You're slow," Taejun said. Not a complaint, an observation, testing the room. "I'm right," she said. "You can have one or the other. You paid for right." He didn't ask again after that. She moved to the watches. The second one, the one Taejun had named out loud in the store, like he'd read her mind, which she still hadn't forgiven and still hadn't mentioned. She turned the case back under magnification and found the recessed serial and found what she'd expected. The number sat in a channel that had been polished after the number was struck. Not before. You polish before you engrave. You polish after, only if you want the digits to swim, to catch a burr, to read wrong to a lazy eye. And when a lazy eye reads a number wrong and writes it into a house certificate, the piece is reborn. New provenance, clean paper. A stolen thing walks out the front door, wearing a birth certificate. The house printed itself. She lifted her head. "This is the laundry." He came off the chair, stopped at the tape. "All of it," she said. "The house doesn't sell jewelry. The house sells paper. The stone under the paper doesn't have to be the same stone the paper was born for, because nobody outside the house ever gets the movement history. You buy the certificate. The certificate is the crime. The stone is just the excuse. How many pieces run through it?" "I've audited 7 so far tonight." She looked at the cart. "There are 200 behind that." He was quiet. Then, low, "How long?" "Since somebody with the skill to open a Sujin mount and close it back so it reads original started opening Sujin mounts." She set the watch down. "That's not a thief with a pair of pliers. That's a master. That's a hand that trained under her, or beside her, or—" She stopped. She had almost said it. She pulled it back and picked up the loop like the loop was the sentence she'd meant to finish. Taejun's eyes stayed on her a beat too long, but he let it go. He didn't have the pieces she had. He couldn't finish what she wouldn't start. She worked another hour. She confirmed the lavalier, the pendant hole re-drilled and hidden under a bezel that didn't match its own age, the classic move to erase a mounting scar that would have told a jeweler which necklace the stone used to live in. She confirmed the brooch, the house brooch, twin to the one Mira kept clutching. She turned it over and read the cutwork on the back, and there it was again. Same hand. She set the brooch down very gently, like it might feel her hands, and moved on. Then she came to the clasps. She'd been circling them all night without touching them, the way you circle the one thing you're afraid is true. Every signature piece in the collection wore a Sujin clasp, double tongue, recessed serial channel. The old woman had signed 30 years of work through the one part of a piece nobody ever looks at, the part that touches the back of your neck, the part you fasten in the dark by feel. Naomi laid them out. She pulled every clasped piece from the cart and lined the clasps up on the black tray in a row, and she loop-read the serial channel on each one, and she wrote the digits on a long card in the order the pieces had been catalogued. At first it was noise. Serial numbers, long strings, house format, nothing. Then she stopped writing, because the store Kohler, the pedestal necklace, the fake, the one with the overstruck serial she'd memorized that morning and told nobody, that clasp didn't hold a serial. It held a number cut on top of a number, 4 digits, a gap, 2 heavier digits. She'd read it as an error correction, a cutter fixing a mistake. Soo-jin didn't make mistakes on clasps. Soo-jin signed clasps in the dark for 30 years. Naomi pulled the card toward the lamp and looked at the whole row of serials at once, instead of one at a time. And she saw it. Not numbers, not house format, sequence. The last 4 digits of each clasp weren't random. Line the pieces up in the order Soo-jin catalogued them. Not the order the store displayed them, the order the old woman's own ledger would have listed them. And the last 4 digits of clasp 1, then clasp 2, then clasp 3, ran straight into each other like a phone number split across 100 business cards. Her hands went still on the tray. "Get me the catalog order," she said. Soo-jin's original catalog order, not the store's, hers. Tae-jun didn't move to a phone. He said, "I have it. The one set of records they didn't burn." She kept a duplicate in the family safe under a different name, a recipe box. Nobody thought to clean a recipe box. "Bring it." Park brought it in 11 minutes. A tin box, hand-lettered, the kind of thing you'd throw out in a house fire and never miss. Inside, index cards. Each card a piece. Each card numbered in a woman's careful hand, and on each card, a stone, a weight, a date. Naomi resorted the clasps by the tin's numbers. Card 1, clasp 1, card 2, clasp 2. She read the last 4 digits down the new order and copied them onto a clean card in one unbroken string. It was not a phone number. It was accounts. Bank routing runs, then account tails, then a break, then dates. The heavier digits, the 2 struck darker, cut deeper. The ones the overstrike was hiding in plain sight. Those were the dates, deposit dates. Every laundered piece carried, cut into the one part of it that touches skin, 4 digits of an account and 2 of a day. The old woman had been building a ledger. Not on paper they could burn. On steel they'd have to melt, one clasp at a time, and never know which ones mattered until it was too late. Naomi checked her read against the second piece, then the third, then a fourth she pulled from the cart, to be sure the pattern held across mounts she hadn't planned to touch tonight. It held every time. A launderer who moved a piece would deepen the last 2 digits without knowing he was signing a date into the record he thought he was erasing. The overstrike he read as a flaw was the old woman's hand closing a loop around him. He'd been carving the evidence deeper with his own tools for 12 years. She counted on him being careful, Naomi said, half to herself. A sloppy man leaves the clasp alone. A careful man recuts it to bury the serial. She built a trap that only springs on the careful ones. She set the 4th clasp down. He was very careful. Naomi sat back on the stool. The string ran the length of the card and off the edge. She wrote it into the jewelry, she said, and her voice had dropped to almost nothing. 30 years, every clasp. She knew somebody was moving dirty money through the house, and she couldn't say it out loud, so she cut it into the collection, where it would sit on rich necks at galas, and nobody would ever read it but the one person who knew how she signed. Tae-jun's jaw moved. Her records were gone a month after the funeral. The paper records. Naomi tapped the tray. Not these. They cleaned the desk. They never thought to read the necklaces. Why would they? You don't burn a ledger you don't know exists. She looked up. She hid it in the last place a launderer would look, inside the merchandise he was laundering. The lamp buzzed. Somewhere in the building a pipe knocked. "There's a gap," Naomi said. "Where?" She ran the string with her fingertip and stopped at the break. Every account has its dates. Every one closes. Except the run ends open. There's a final account with no closing date and no verifying digit. The last code isn't finished. She turned and looked at the cart, then past the cart, at the case she hadn't opened yet, the one she'd left for the end on purpose. The check digit that closes the whole ledger, the number that proves the accounts are real and not a dead woman's paranoia. She didn't cut it into a clasp. Then where? Naomi stood. She crossed to the far case, the sealed one, and broke her own seal, and lifted out the piece she'd been saving. Not the fake from the pedestal, the one thing in the whole collection that had never left the family. A loose stone in a padded fold. The one Su Jin had never let out of her sight. The real one. The sapphire. She hadn't examined it up close. She'd said as much that morning. The true stone was out here somewhere, carrying something. Now it sat in her palm, moon-cut, deep as a well, and she carried it to the bench and seated it and put it under the strongest magnification she had, and turned the light to rake across the culet at an angle. For a moment, nothing. Just a beautiful old stone with a colonial history and a lot of blood behind its light. Then she found it. Under the culet, in the one facet no setting would ever cover, ground so fine it read as an inclusion until you knew to look. Digits. Microscopic. The check digit, the verifier, the number that closed the ledger and turned 100 clasps of steel into evidence a court could stand on. The real sapphire held the last code. The whole thing had been built so that the ledger was worthless without the one stone the family would never sell, and unreadable without the one hand that knew how the old woman signed. She'd protected her own accusation with the two things she trusted most, the stone and the craft. Naomi didn't touch the wax. She didn't write it down. She read it 4 times, into memory, the way she'd read the overstruck clasp in the store, and she let the loop come away from her eye. "It's real," she said. "The ledger's real. Every account." She wasn't guessing. And she had the routing, the tails, the dates, and the key to prove they connect. She set the sapphire down like it was a live thing. Somebody in that family has been washing money through the collection for longer than the necklace has been missing, and she knew, and she died. Taejun had come off the tape line. He was standing at the bench now, and she didn't send him back. "There's one more thing," she said, "and you're not going to like the shape of it." She pulled the tin box back and found the card for the store necklace, the pedestal piece, the imperial moon, or the thing wearing its name. On the card, in the old woman's hand, the piece was logged with a date. Naomi checked that date against the store's own provenance paper, the clean acquisition record Taejun's photo had captured through glass 12 years back, the one that said the necklace surfaced at Maison Lumière as a fresh, honest purchase. The dates didn't line up the way a coincidence lines up. "The necklace vanished from your family the same season she died," Naomi said. "Everyone knows that. That's the story. The story is, she dies, it disappears, 12 years of nothing, it turns up at the rival's counter." She slid the 2 cards together under the lamp so the dates sat side by side. But it didn't take 12 years to get to that counter. It got there in 3 days. Taejun went very still. 3 days after she died, Naomi said. This piece cleared the store's intake. Papered, logged, birth certificate printed, 3 days. You don't move a colonial sapphire across a city and launder its provenance in 3 days unless the paper was already drawn up before the funeral. She looked at him. Unless somebody knew she was dying, or knew when, and had the intake waiting. An inside leak. The stone didn't walk out the door 12 years late and stumble into a rival's window by accident. Somebody carried it out of your house while your family was still in black and had it papered before the flowers wilted. She kept her voice level, professional, the verdict voice. The necklace passed the store 3 days after her death. That's not a theft that got lucky. That's a theft that had the schedule. The lamp buzzed on. Neither of them filled the quiet for a moment. Who had access, she said, to both? Your grandmother's collection and the store's intake, in the same week she died. Taejun's hand had closed slowly on the edge of the bench. The signet ring caught the light. Family, he said. It would have to be family. Then your grandmother didn't hide a ledger from a stranger. Naomi began, one by one, to seal the pieces back into their cases, chain tags aligned, her wax pressed fresh over each latch. She hid it from someone at her own table. Someone who could burn her desk in a month and never think to check the one place she'd sign the truth. She fastened the last case and set her palm flat on the lid. She wrote her killer's bookkeeping into the back of every clasp and trusted that one day somebody would fasten one in the dark and feel that the numbers weren't numbers. She lifted the sapphire, folded it back into its padding, and sealed it in a case of its own with 2 seals instead of 1. This stays with me, she said, under the chain. Not the safe, not you. Understood. She looked at the row of sealed cases, at the tin box, at the long card with the ledger running off its edge, and she pulled a fresh card and started copying the whole string into a second hand, so there'd be a duplicate she carried and a duplicate she hid. Halfway down the card, her pen stopped. The last account. The open one. The one the sapphire's check digit closed. She read the routing tale again, the account it verified, and something in the shape of it sat wrong, familiar, like a face you've seen at a funeral and can't place. She didn't say it out loud. She wrote it down and underlined it once and drew a small box around the 2 heavy date digits, and she folded the card into the inner zip pocket of the tote bag, the pocket that had held the photo, the pocket that had held the receipt, the pocket a gloved hand had opened 90 minutes into a Thursday that already felt like a month ago. Outside the lab door, one of her guards shifted his weight and the floor creaked, and Naomi's head came up, and then it was just the guard, just the floor. We have the whole thing, Taejun said. The accounts, the dates, the key, enough to take to anyone. We have enough to be right, Naomi said. She capped the pen. Being right and being safe aren't the same paper. She looked at the cart, at the 200 pieces she hadn't finished, at the tin box a dead woman had trusted more than her own family. Whoever moved that necklace in 3 days knew her ledger might exist someday. They've had 12 years to get ready for the night somebody finally read a clasp. She set her last seal. And across the city, in a room she hadn't seen yet, a phone that had been ringing all afternoon was finally answered, and a man with a serpent on the left side of his neck listened to someone tell him exactly which lab Han Taejun's cars had rolled up to at midnight, and smiled the way he always smiled, and said the auditor had been busier than they'd hoped, and that it was time the world heard what kind of woman had been handling the family's jewelry in the dark. The story broke before the sun cleared the buildings. Naomi was still in the lab, sealing the last case, when her phone lit on the bench and did not stop lighting. Not one message. A flood. The screen scrolled itself. She turned it face down. Then she turned it back up. The headline sat at the top like a stone dropped in still water. A photograph of her from the store. Mid-motion, the tote bag open in her hand, the sapphire bracelet catching the clinical light. Cropped so tight the caption did the rest. Han families hired hands. The woman caught with the jewels. Under it, a second line, smaller, meaner. American appraiser paid to manufacture a scandal against Maison Lumiere. She read it once. She did not read it twice. 3 more outlets carried the same frame within the hour, the same crop, the same word doing the work. Fabricator, paid, hired. One of them had already found the Dumont case and twisted it inside out. Not the woman who refused to lie for a bank, but the appraiser, a bank once let go. Same facts. Opposite spine. Somebody had handed them the file with the good half torn off. The comments came faster than the articles. She didn't scroll them, and she didn't have to. The notification count carried the temperature all by itself, ticking up in the corner of the screen like a fever chart. A stranger 3 hours ago. A thief by breakfast. And the thing about a caption is that it doesn't need to be true to become the first fact everyone learns about you. It only needs to be the loudest, and Hyarin had bought loud in bulk. By 7 o'clock, the same photograph was moving with 4 different sentences under it, and every sentence pointed at the same door: the American, the outsider, the woman with her hand in the bag. Nobody had printed the word ledger. Nobody had printed the word sapphire. The silence in the middle of all that noise was the most expensive thing money had bought that morning. Naomi set the phone down and pressed both palms flat on the cold steel bench. The door opened without a knock. Taejun. He had a tablet in one hand and the stillness of a man who had already read everything on it. Park behind him, at the frame, saying nothing. "You've seen it," he said. "I've seen it." Seo Hye-rin placed it. He turned the tablet toward her. A woman in white and silver, pearls at the throat, standing on a marble step with a microphone crowd bent toward her like reeds. Do Hwan's sister-in-law. She runs their public face. By noon, it will be on every screen in the country that the Han family bought an outsider to slander a rival house. And the sapphire? Not one word about a sapphire, not one word about a ledger. His jaw set. They are not fighting the evidence. They are burying you so no one asks what you found. He swiped the tablet and a clip started. Herring on the marble step. The reeds of microphones bent toward her mouth. Sound off, but the woman didn't need sound. Every gesture was rehearsed to a half-inch. A tilt of the chin that read as sorrow. A hand pressed briefly to the pearls at her throat that read as a house wounded. She spoke for maybe 40 seconds and made herself the victim of the whole affair in every one of them. "She's good," Naomi said. It wasn't a compliment. It was reconnaissance. "She's the best they have at this," Taejun said. Do Hwan smiles. She weeps. Between the two of them there's never a fist in the frame. Only a family, grieving, and an outsider who came to tear it apart for foreign money. Naomi already knew that. She'd known it the second she saw the crop. You don't argue with a lock. You argue with the person holding the key, and they'd decided she wasn't going to be a person by lunchtime. She was going to be a caption. Taejun put the tablet down. "I can end this today." How? 3 of those outlets carry debt I own. The 4th has a license that renews through a board with 2 Han seats. He said it flat, the way another man would read a grocery list. By tonight, the story is gone. By tomorrow, the men who wrote it are looking for other work. Hyarin learns what it costs to point at what belongs to me. The lab went quiet, except for the hum of the corrected daylight lamps. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "No." His head tilted, half a degree. "You crush 4 outlets," she said. "And the story isn't the appraiser was right. The story is the Black Dragon silences the press to protect his hired hand. You'd be writing Hye-rin's second headline for her. You'd be proving me bought, with your own hands." She stepped off the stool. That was condition 3. No violence, no burning their house down because they threw a rock through mine. This isn't violence. This is money. It's the same fist wearing a glove. She held his eyes. "You promised. You said it back to me verbatim. twice. Her voice didn't rise. It got quieter, which was worse. If you break it now, you break it forever, and I walk out of this the way I walked out of Dumont, with my license and nothing else, and your evidence stays sealed in cases I'll never sign open. Park shifted his weight at the door. Taejun didn't look at him. He set both hands on the bench across from her, and for a moment, the two of them were mirrored over the row of sealed cases. The man who solved things by owning them, and the woman who solved them by reading them. You understand what happens if you're wrong on a screen, he said. Not sealed in a coffer where I control the room, in front of everyone. Hyerin will hang the rest of your life on the frame where your hands shook. I understand it better than you do, Naomi said. You've never had to be right in a room that wanted you to fail. I've done it since I was 24. She held the edge of the bench. That's the whole job. That's Dumont. That's every table I've ever sat at, where the money in the room was betting against my mouth. Then what? Taejun said. Not surrender. A question with teeth. You let them call you a thief across the whole country, and you do nothing. I didn't say nothing. Naomi turned back to the bench. Her hand went to the row of sealed cases, walked down them, and stopped. They took a picture of me holding a bag. Fine. I'll give them a better picture. Of what? Of me being right. Live. Where they can't crop it. She said it and felt the shape of the risk close around her like a room with one door. If she did this and her hands shook, if she read one stone wrong under a camera, Hyerin wouldn't need a second headline. Naomi would have handed her the whole story gift-wrapped, but a caption you can twist. A woman opening a fake in front of the world, calling every cut before she makes it, and being right every single time. That you cannot crop. You want a broadcast, Taejun said slowly. I want a bench. A camera that doesn't cut away, and one of the fakes I already documented. Not the sapphire. That one never leaves my custody. A piece Hyerin's own house certified as real. I take it apart on camera, and I show the country the lie sitting inside the setting. No editing, no voiceover, just the stone and the truth and my two hands. They'll say the piece is planted, that you swapped it. Then I'll use one they pick. She almost smiled. Not warmth, edge. Let Maison Lumière send a representative to stand at my shoulder and choose the piece from their own inventory. Sealed, chain of custody, their eyes on my hands the whole time. If it's honest, I look like a fraud on live television and Hyerin wins clean. She spread her fingers over the case. It won't be honest. I already read it in the dark. I just have to read it again in the light where they're watching. For a moment, Taejun said nothing. Then he picked the tablet back up, and this time when he looked at her, something in his face had rearranged. Not softer, sharper. The look of a man who has just watched someone refuse the easy weapon and reach for the hard one on purpose. You could lose everything on a broadcast, he said. I've lost everything on smaller stages. She was already pulling her tools into a roll. Get me the room, get me the camera, and get Maison Lumière their front row seat. Hyerin wants to make me a story. Fine, Kachyo. The Korean came out low and clean, a word she rarely spent. Kachyo. I'll make her watch it end. They set it for that afternoon. Not a studio. A conference floor Taejun controlled. Glass on 3 sides. One long table. One overhead rig with a macro camera feeding a live stream nobody could edit on delay because Naomi had made him promise it went out raw or it didn't go out at all. Word moved fast. By 2 o'clock, the count on the stream had 6 digits and climbed while she watched. By 2:15, it had 7. Maison Lumière sent a man in a muted gray suit and a woman who logged the piece. They chose it themselves. A brooch from the same house collection, sealed in a house case, house certificate attached, the paper swearing under the Maison's own name that every stone was natural, matched, original to the mount. He signed the seal in front of the camera at Naomi's insistence, so the whole country watched the house vouch for its own peace before her gloves ever touched it. Then the gray-suited man set it in front of her and stepped back to the wall, arms folded, waiting for her to fail. He'd come to watch her drown. He would stand there the whole time, believing that was still the plan. Naomi sat. She snapped on a fresh pair of gloves. She turned the brooch under the macro lens so the whole feed could see the certificate first. The house name, the claim, the signature. "This paper says every stone here is what the house says it is," she told the camera. Her voice was level, unhurried, the visceral quick of her energy pulled tight and controlled. "I'm going to open it. If I'm lying, you'll see me lie. Nobody's cutting away." She started at the clasp. She talked as she worked, not to fill silence, to leave no gap for anyone to edit meaning into. She named the metal. She named the age of the solder against the age of the gold, and showed the seam under raking light where the two didn't match. She lifted a prong, then another, and counted them into the camera. 4 worn originals, 2 retipped in gold, that hadn't breathed the same 12 years as the rest. She tilted the headstone until the window opened under the crown, that gray mouth swallowing the light instead of throwing it, and she held it there, still, so 100,000 people watched a matched natural stone drink the lamp and give nothing back. The gray-suited man against the wall unfolded his arms, folded them again. She kept going. She turned the headstone a quarter turn and dropped the light lower, and the window widened. Not a flaw a natural stone might carry, but the flat, dead pane of something grown in a factory and cut to fool a glance. She held a loop to the girdle and named the polish lines, the way real facets meet at a crisp seam, and this one didn't. The way the culet sat too shallow for the depth the certificate swore to. Every claim she made visible first and said second, so the feed could never be accused of taking her word. She was not asking the country to trust her. She was making the stone confess in front of them. "That's the swap," Naomi said. "Certified real, set with paste, dressed as a matched stone, in a mount reopened and closed by a hand that knew exactly how to hide the work." She set her loupe down and looked straight into the lens. "This is what the house sells. Not jewels, paper, and the paper lies." She should have stopped there. She had it. The stream count was climbing. The story was already turning. She could feel it turning the way you feel weather change before it breaks. She had reclaimed the frame. But her thumb had found something on the underside of the mount. A ridge too clean to be wear. She almost let it go. She didn't let it go. She flipped the brooch, brought the macro lens down to its shortest focus, and raked the light across the inner curve of the gallery where no buyer ever looks, the hidden belly of the setting, the place a maker signs when a maker wants to be found by exactly one kind of person and no one else. A mark, microscopic, struck, not engraved, 2 letters and a figure between them she had traced with her own hand 10,000 times, because he had made her trace it until she could do it blind. A maker's mark. His maker's mark. Naomi went very still. The camera didn't know. The gray-suited man didn't know. The 7-digit count clicking upward didn't know that the woman at the table had just stopped breathing over a jewel on a live feed, and that it had nothing to do with the swap, because the swap was 12 years old. The house had said so. Everyone had said so. The fake passed intake 3 days after Sujin died, and Naomi had built her whole night on that date. But this mark wasn't 12 years old. She knew his hand the way you know a voice through a wall. The stamp had a habit. The second letter sat a hair proud of the first, always, because his old bench block was worn on one corner, and he'd never replaced it. Said a worn tool that still cut true was worth more than a new one that hadn't earned it yet. This stamp had the same proud second letter, and the metal around it, the gold she'd just aged against the solder, this retip, This closing, the freshest work on the whole piece. Months old, not years. He'd set this stone, recently, with his own worn block and his own true hand. The years folded up wrong in front of her. She had grieved him. She had grieved him, properly. The slow way, the way you grieve a person who leaves no body and no note. With the shop keys he'd left her, the debt he'd left her, the empty bench in the back she could never make herself sit at. She had told herself 100 versions of the end and made peace with the cruelest ones, because the cruelest ones at least closed the door. And all of it, every version, had been wrong. The door had never been closed. Somebody had just been holding it shut from the other side. Which meant the workshop that vanished and left her a business and a debt and a hole where a teacher used to stand, had not closed because a man walked into the dark and never came out. He hadn't disappeared. He'd been taken. And somewhere in the last 12 years he had been sitting at a bench that wasn't his, under a house that wasn't his, closing lies into settings and signing them with the one mark that could tell the world he was still breathing, signing them where only she would ever think to look. Dr. Arthur Bennett was alive, and they were making him certify the fakes. Naomi's hands stayed on the brooch. That was the only thing that saved the broadcast. 20 years of teaching her that the hands finish the piece no matter what the heart is doing had kept her fingers moving while everything behind her ribs went to water. Steady hands, he used to say, guiding her wrists over the loop when she was 24 and shaking. Steady hands are the last thing that loves you when everything else quits. She could hear it now, the exact pitch of it, coming up through 12 years of dirt she'd thrown over the sound herself. She lowered the brooch to the felt. She set it down as gently as if it were the man himself. The stream waited. The gray-suited man waited. Somewhere across the city, in white and silver, Hyarin was watching her own story come apart on camera, and did not yet know that the appraiser had just found the one thing that made this bigger than any of them. Naomi lifted her eyes back to the lens. Her voice, when it came, was steady. She would not give them this. Not here. Not until she knew where he was. The house certified a fake, she said, and it came out clean, controlled, the whole visceral engine of her held down under one flat surface. You saw it open in my hands. That's the story. That's all of it. It was not all of it. It was the smallest piece of it. She reached up and killed the feed herself, one gloved finger on the cutoff, and the 7-digit number froze and hung and went dark. Then the room was just glass and afternoon light, and Taejun standing where he'd stood the whole time, watching her, and Naomi Bennett sitting at a table with a dead woman's fake in front of her and a living man's signature under her thumb, and no way she could see, not yet, not tonight, to reach across 12 years and pull him out. She turned the brooch over one more time, just to see the mark again, just to be sure. The second letter sat proud of the first, exactly proud, the worn corner of a block he'd refused to replace because a true tool that survived was worth more than a new one that hadn't earned its keep. And there it was, the whole man in 2 struck letters, alive, working, signing. Naomi, Taejun said, careful. He had seen her hands stop. He had seen her cut her own broadcast at the peak of it, thrown away the victory mid-swing, and he was too good a reader of rooms not to know that something had walked into this one that hadn't been in the story an hour ago. What did you find? She didn't answer him. She couldn't yet. She pressed her thumb over the mark as if she could keep it warm, and outside the glass the city held its million lights, and one of them, somewhere, was a room she hadn't seen, with a bench that wasn't his, and an old man's true hand still cutting in the dark, and for the first time since the hotel, since the navy dress, since the door she'd checked for exits on the way in, Naomi Bennett had no idea where the exit was. A bench, Naomi said. Taejun waited. Not a name. A bench. She lifted her thumb off the galley and turned the brooch so the light climbed the inside of the setting. Whoever closed this piece did it months ago, on a worn block that pushes the second letter proud of the first. That's a signature, and it belongs to a hand I know is supposed to be dead. Park went still at the wall. Taejun crossed the line she'd drawn on the floor without asking permission, and for once she let him. Alive, he said. Not a question either. Alive, held, certifying your enemy's lies with the only skill that ever loved him. She set the brooch down like it might bruise. So no, we don't burn the outlets. We don't burn anything. We find the room. The room found them first. The call came at dawn Saturday, and it did not come as a threat. It came as an invitation, printed on cream stock and hand-delivered to the glass floor by a man in a wine-colored suit who smiled the whole way to the door and left before anyone could refuse him. Seo Do-hwan, the serpent riding the left of his throat, requesting the pleasure of a private conversation. Neutral ground, a truce, the card said. A way for two old houses to stop bleeding on the front pages. Naomi read it twice and handed it back. He wants the room in daylight. Fine, let him open his own door. They met at a members' club downtown, a floor of dark wood and quiet, 3 of Do-hwan's men lining the wall like coat racks with pulses. Do-hwan rose when Naomi entered, both hands out, the smile arriving before he did. Ms. Bennett. The woman who reads gold in the dark. Sit, please. You've cost me a fortune. I respect that more than you'd guess. I didn't come to be respected. No, he poured for her. She left the glass alone. You came because Taejun told you a truce would be a trap. And he's right, in his way. But I'm not offering him a truce. I'm offering you one. He slid a folder across the wood. A settlement. The Han estate keeps its collection. My house keeps its name. And the appraiser who's been dragged through the mud walks away clean. Well paid, licensed, unsued. You've seen what my sister-in-law can do to a reputation. I'm offering to call her off. And, in exchange, you certify that the ledger is inconclusive. Still smiling. Not false, just unproven. A dead woman's numbers on a clasp. Who could ever swear to that? Naomi laughed once, short and bright, and the sound landed wrong in that hushed room. Ani, she said, and let the Korean sit there. You had the wrong wall built. Try again. The smile didn't drop. It curdled, which was worse. Then I'm sorry to do this in front of you. Do-hwan lifted 2 fingers. The door behind him opened, and Han Sung-ho walked in. He came in gray, the same forgettable gray, the small oath mark riding his wrist, and he carried a slim leather case he set on the table, with the care of a man diffusing something. Taejun, at Naomi's shoulder, went very quiet. Blood recognizes blood before the eyes do. Cousin, Seong-ho said. Seong-ho. I've spent the week trying to protect the family from this. He opened the case. Documents. Crisp, notarized, ribboned. You should know what your appraiser has been carrying into rooms that don't belong to her. He turned the top page so Naomi could read her own name typed beside Taejun's, above a block of dense clauses, above 2 signatures, authorization to remove, alter, and privately liquidate Han family assets. Signed by the head of the house, signed and countersigned by the custodian herself. He looked at Naomi, and there was something almost gentle in it. You've been the front, from the first night. He needed a clean face to move dirty stone through a rival's floor, and when it turned, he needed a name to hang it on that wasn't Han. The room tilted. Naomi felt it go, the way a floor goes when a joist you trusted turns out to be painted foam. She looked at the signatures. Taejun's was Taejun's. Hers was hers. She had never signed this page. That's not my signature, she said. It's notarized, Song-ho said softly. The notary is downstairs. The dates are witnessed. You'll forgive the house for believing paper over a woman it met 8 days ago. He said it like a man closing a drawer. Calm, practiced. The forgettable face that had stood at the edge of every room she'd worked, holding a clipboard nobody looked at twice, moving her through doors, timing her hour. She saw all of it at once now. Song-ho at the hotel, Song-ho arranging her client access, Song-ho's small oath mark clutched the way Mira clutched her brooch. The whole architecture of 8 days, built to end exactly here, with her name on a page and her feet already pointed at the exit. And Taejun said nothing. That was the knife, not the forgery, the silence. He stood at her shoulder, and he did not open his mouth to swear the page was a lie, and in the half-second of that silence, Naomi understood exactly how the Dumont Bank had felt when they thought they'd bought her, exactly how 40 buyers had felt when they'd reached for their own purses. She was the scapegoat. She had always been positioned to be the scapegoat. The clean face, walked in, filmed touching everything, custodian of the whole crime by her own signature. She stood. Then we're done. Naomi, Taejun started. You froze the scene and named me the arsonist. She pulled the tote bag onto her shoulder, hand over the zippered pocket out of pure habit. I told you in the store. You don't hold me. Turns out you didn't need to. You just needed my name on a page I never touched. She turned for the door. Keep your empire. I'll keep my license. It's all I ever leave a room with. Stop, Taejun's voice, and it wasn't loud, and everyone in the room stopped anyway. He didn't argue, he didn't defend. He reached into his own coat, took out a pen, steel, plain, and pulled the notarized page toward him across the wood. Do-hwan half rose. Song-ho's hand twitched toward the case. Taejun turned the document over to its blank back and wrote, fast, in his own hand, and signed it, and dated it, and slid it in front of Naomi. She read it. Full, permanent, irrevocable transfer of the entire Imperial Moon collection and all associated custody, ownership, and vote to Naomi Bennett. Not custody this time, ownership, the whole thing. The name Han lifted off it like a hand off a throat. There, Taejun said. Now it can't be a trap. There's nothing of mine left in it to protect. He looked at his cousin, then at Do-hwan, then back at her, and the flat voice cracked 1 degree. I'd lose the empire before I'd make you its prisoner. It's already lost. Take it. Do-hwan laughed, delighted and vicious. How noble. And how convenient. Now she owns the fraud outright. You've just gift-wrapped your scapegoat, cousin. She signs everything now. Naomi wasn't listening to Do-hwan. She was looking at the forged page, still lying face up under Taejun's fresh signature. 2 documents now on the same table. The forgery, dated 8 days ago, and Taejun's transfer, signed 60 seconds ago, the ink still wet enough to shine. She took out her loupe. Nobody move, she said, and the manicure shop brightness was gone from her voice, replaced by the thing under it. She bent over the forged page, held the loupe to Taejun's signature on the old document, the one Seong-ho claimed was 8 days old, then to the ink of the transfer he'd just written, then back. Huh, she said. Yeah, there it is. There what is. Do-hwan, not smiling now. Iron gall goes brown as it ages, oxidizes. 8 days, you'd see the edges of the stroke starting to turn, feathering, a warm halo bleeding into the fiber where the acid's been eating the paper. She straightened. Your 8-day-old signature has sharp black edges and 0 halo. It's the same ink, laid down the same week, as a signature I watched dry 90 seconds ago. She held both pages up to the club's light, side by side, so Do-hwan's own men could see the 2 strokes match. Same batch, same nib pressure. Same wet black. One claims to be a week and a half old. It's lying about its age the way your certificates lie about their stones. She tapped the forgery. This authorization was signed after it was dated. Recently, this week, by somebody with access to a Han signet and a notary who owes the wrong house. She turned her head, slow, and put her eyes on Sung-ho, somebody who's been a second pair of eyes inside every building I've walked into, somebody who fed a man in a store the words recessed cereal before I told a living soul I'd read them. Sung-ho's hand closed around the leather case. The caller crossed the store's intake 3 days after your grandmother died, Naomi went on, and now she was walking, slow, around the table toward him. Paper already printed, provenance already clean. That takes somebody with a key to her collection and a key to their intake in the same week. Family. You said it yourself. She stopped in front of him. You cleaned her records a month after the funeral so nobody could read the trap she'd built, but you never read it either. You just recut the clasps to bury the cereals, and every time you dug your own dates deeper into the steel. She smiled, and it had no warmth in it at all. You've been signing his confession for 12 years, Opa. With his tools. Du-hwan's smile finally fully died. Tae-jun looked at his cousin the way a house looks at the beam that rotted it from inside, and he did not raise a hand, and he did not raise his voice. Get out, he said. You'll answer for her in the light, not here. Song-ho reached for the door. 2 of Do-hwan's coat racks stepped aside to let him, and then, reading the room the way survivors do, stepped aside from Do-hwan too. Naomi picked up the transfer page, the real one, the one that made her owner of everything, and folded it once, and slid it into the zippered pocket with the ledger card, and the receipt and the photograph, all of it, the whole war in one seam. The auction's Thursday, she said. Your house is selling the Imperial Moon necklace as a clean acquisition. She looked at Do-hwan. I'll be there. As the legal owner of every stone in the building, bring your notary, bring your sister-in-law, bring the cameras you love. She opened the door herself. And bring a chair for the man you've had cutting in the dark for 12 years. He's going to want to sit down when he sees the room. Thursday came gold. Naomi entered Maison Lumière in a golden gown. Hollywood waves swept over one shoulder, and the floor that had once locked its steel shutters on her and called her thief now turned as one and did not know what to call her. The auctioneer's podium stood where the pedestal had stood. Rows of chairs, cameras, hers this time, and the press, and Hai-rin's people, all of them live. Do-hwan in charcoal at the front, the serpent quiet on his neck. Hai-rin beside him in white and silver and pearls, chin up, the story already half-written behind her eyes. Naomi didn't take a bidder's paddle. She walked to the front, unfolded her ownership, and handed it to the auctioneer. This sale can't proceed, she said, for the room and the lenses. You're offering the Imperial Moon necklace as a clean acquisition. The Imperial Moon necklace was never sold, never lost, and its center stone has been in my custody since Friday. What sits on your velvet is glass. She set the real sapphire on the podium in its double-sealed case and broke both seals in front of them. Moon-cut, deep, honest. She turned it culet up under the house's own loop and put it on the room's own screens, and there, under the culet, microscopic, reading like an inclusion to anyone who didn't know to look, the check digit, the last number. Every clasp in this collection carries 4 digits, she said. In your grandmother's original order, they spell routing, accounts, dates, a laundering ledger, cut into steel over 30 years by the woman whose name is on this building's soul. It doesn't validate without a final key. She lifted the stone. The key is under this culet. The key only fits the real necklace, which means this stone belongs to the Imperial Moon, and the Imperial Moon was never yours to sell. She turned to Do-hwan. You've been laundering money through your own grandmother's jewelry, and she left the receipt inside the diamonds. Slander, Hyrin said, rising, pearls swinging. She's paid to. Bring him in, Naomi said. The side door opened. Dr. Arthur Bennett walked into the room on his own feet. Thin now, thinner than 12 years ago, short gray hair and a white beard trimmed by someone who'd finally let him near a mirror. Thin framed glasses, hands still marked by metalwork, hands that had cut in the dark for a house that owned him. He crossed to the podium and stood beside the woman he'd trained at 24, and when he saw the sapphire, his shoulders came down an inch, the way a man breathes when the last thing he loves turns out to have survived. I set that stone, he said, to the cameras, steady. I set every piece with the mark you'll find in the galleries, 2 letters, the second one proud. I was told my family would be safe if my hands stayed busy. He looked at Do-hwan. You certified my forced work as authentic and sold it as clean. I'll say so under oath. I've been saying it in my head for 12 years. He turned to Naomi then, and his voice dropped where the microphones still caught it. You always read the galley last. I used to tell you the honest work hides where nobody bothers to look. A breath. You looked. Naomi's jaw tightened once and held. She'd carried his silence like a debt since a hotel suite 8 days ago, and she did not let it show now, because the room was watching and the work wasn't finished. The room did not roar. It went quiet, which is what real collapse sounds like. Do-hwan stood into that quiet, and he was still, for 1 second, a man deciding whether to reach for a weapon or a lawyer. He looked at Taejun, who had come in behind Naomi and not moved, whose hands were empty, whose men were unarmed at the doors. Taejun didn't hit him. He handed the auctioneer a second folder. The ledger, decrypted and notarized, Taejun said. Filed this morning with the financial authority and 3 newspapers I don't own. The routing numbers, the accounts, the deposit dates. Your name is on 40 of them. My cousin's oath mark is on the intake logs. There's nothing to fight. There's only a paper trail, and it's already left the building. He almost smiled. You taught my family that money freezes anything. She taught me it also thaws. Do-hwan looked at the empty velvet, the glass necklace still sitting there under the podium light, a crown for nothing. He'd built a house on the same lie for a decade, that the certificate was the thing, that paper was heavier than stone. He opened his mouth. No move in him found a wall to lean on. His 3 men were already reading the room the way men read a market before a crash, easing back toward the doors, disowning him with their shoulders. You'll want a lawyer, Naomi said, almost kind. Not a notary. Those are spoken for. Seong-ho was expelled that hour, walked out past the cameras by 2 men who a week ago took his orders, the oath mark on his wrist worth nothing now that the house it swore to had read what he'd carved. The authority moved on the accounts before the auction chairs were folded. The Seo Empire didn't fall in fire. It fell in filings, in frozen assets, in a story that finally ran with the sapphire in the frame instead of Naomi's open bag. Hyerin's press turned on the family it had defended, because press does that. The second headline was never the one she'd planned. And the building, 3 floors, mirrored stairs, the pedestal where a fake had worn a crown, became Naomi's. She owned it now, outright, ink dry and proven. She did not turn it into a vault. She turned it into a school. Benches on the 2nd floor, north light on the 3rd, Arthur's restored brooch under glass at the entrance, the house brooch, the twin of Mira's, cleaned and honest at last, its mark facing out where students would learn to read it. A training center for appraisers who would sign their own names to nothing they hadn't seen with their own eyes. The first thing she hung on the wall was a framed photograph of Han Soo-jin in her hanbok-inflected evening wear, the imperial moon at her throat, the woman who'd built a trap that only sprang on the careful ones. Arthur took the 3rd floor, The north light, the bench nobody would ever force him to leave. His hands still shook in the mornings. They went steady the second they closed on a stone. He taught the way he'd taught her, palms over the students' palms, guiding, patient, saying the old line to a new room. Steady hands are the last thing that loves you when everything else quits. Naomi heard it drift down the mirrored stairs one afternoon and had to stop on a step and breathe before she kept climbing. The sapphire went back into the real necklace. She reset it herself, under the loop, on the second-floor bench, and when the moon-cut sat home in the imperial moon, it read like a stone that had finally been allowed to stop hiding. Taejun came the day the last bench went in, empty-handed, as always. Then not. He set a small box on the workbench beside her, worn leather, older than the building. Inside, a loop, a jeweler's loop, brass gone soft with handling, restored, the glass replaced, the barrel re-knurled by someone who knew how. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "She read every stone in that photograph through it. I had it fixed. I didn't buy it. It was already ours." He pushed it an inch toward her. "Not everything has to be bought." Naomi picked it up. It fit her hand like it had been cut for it. She held it to the north light, turned it, checked the glass the way he'd watched her check 100 stones, and something in her chest that had been braced since a navy dress and a checked-for-exits door finally set itself down. "Finally," she said, and she brought it to her eye. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, K-Fam, have you ever had the most skilled hands in the room and still watched someone pin the crime on you? Have you seen the person you trusted most turn out to be the one holding the knife? And when the proof was finally in your hands, did you wait to be rescued, or did you stand up and prove the truth yourself? Mark my words, K-Fam. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about truth, dignity, and justice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.